I'm Edie Lush, Executive Editor of Hub Culture here in Davos 2023. So it's still cold outside. It's getting a little bit warmer at the poles, and here to tell us a little bit more, Professor Gail Whiteman. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, Edie. Great to be back.
University of Exeter and founder of Arctic Basecamp, which I was delighted to visit yesterday.
Indeed.
Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome.
So the theme has been collaborating in a fracturing world here at the forum. I wonder if you see any collaboration around the important issue of the poles and climate.
Well, absolutely. I think what makes this Davos different than in the past is that there is an entire session that I was part of inside the Congress Center on unpacking the polar crisis. So the poles in a fractured world is interesting because the poles themselves are fracturing if we take a look at the sea ice. So in terms of global temperature change, we've got the poles north and south together 3 times warmer than the rest of the world, the Arctic 4 times warmer than the rest of the world, and Svalbard, a part of the Arctic, 7 times faster than the rest of the world. So we're certainly seeing sea ice and glacier retreat that's massively going to be driving global risks around the world. So the fact that that was inside the Congress Center and not off Broadway, which is where we normally have it, at Arctic Basecamp, which is a science tent beside the Schatzalp Hotel, I mean, I think that's a big step forward.
Big step forward. Are we moving fast enough?
No, absolutely not. We're completely not moving fast enough. If we take a look at global emissions, they continue to rise. That is what is driving polar change, and that is what's ramping up extreme weather, sea level rise, and really threats to food, water security, supply chain disruption. That's the poles calling, and they are calling louder and louder, and people don't know that yet.
So who else besides you is sounding the clarion call? Who else was in the Congress Center? Who are the allies?
Yeah, so I think from a head of state perspective, Prince Albert II of Monaco, a longtime polar supporter of both the science and sharing the message. He was the keynote, so he was the opening remarks. We also had president of the Stanley Council was in the session with me, and it was moderated by Johan Rockström. So lots of support from the scientific community, lots of support from the indigenous community, and some support from heads of state. And what we did see was a few of the business CEOs also in the audience, but nowhere enough.
So it's unbelievably worrying. I think if there's one thing that keeps me up at night is thinking about the poles, right?
Absolutely.
So what do businesses need to do?
Well, I think the first thing is they really need to know that they have to jump on that, halving emission target by 2030. I think there's still this idea that as long as it was net zero by 2050, we have time, and there's just not enough deep emission cuts that are happening right now. I also think there is this idea that geoengineering somehow will save us and get us out of this polar crisis or this climate crisis, and that really is not the safe bet to bet on.
One thing that people who are watching this video can do right now, what would it be?
I think the first thing it would be is to actually try to look at how do they have their own emissions by 2030, and then figure out what is their sphere of influence and who can they influence the most that has the biggest power to make the biggest shifts happening today.
Gail, thanks so much for stopping by the Hub Culture studio.
Great to be back.
Great to see you. See you again next year. I'm Edie Lush.
Thank you.